go through the protocols. Only speak when invited to by the chair. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and direct all communications via the chair. For those joining remotely, please ensure that your mics are muted when you're not speaking. If you're having any technical difficulties, please use the chat function in Google Meet to alert the meeting. Please do not use the chat function for putting formal questions to the committee or to make other comments. Any persistent disruptive behaviour will result in removal from the meeting. I'll now hand over to the chair.
Thank you. Welcome to the Corporate Committee, 28th of June 2022. What I would like to do first is I'd like to invite members in the room to say hello and to introduce themselves. So if I could start off with Councillor Desmond on the front row.
Thank you so much. I'm Councillor Desmond, representative.
Councillor Sadek.
Hi everyone, I'm Councillor Ali Sadek, Councillor in Kings Park Ward.
Hi, Jess Webb, Wick Ward.
Hi, I'm John Norcross from Haggerston.
Hi, this is Councillor Claudia Tepederlov, Victoria Ward.
Hi, this is Councillor Midnight Ross from Haggerston Ward.
Councillor Olsen for London Fields. Councillor Leodol Scott, London Fields.
Councillor Alistair Binney-Lubbock, Hackney Downs.
I could turn to officers as well, please.
I'm Jerry McCarthy. I'm the Head of Community Safety Enforcement and Business Regulation.
And I'm Steve Davison, Enforcement Manager from Jerry's Service.
I'd like to welcome online, we have Councillor Samatar, we have Councillor Fajana Thomas, who's the Cabinet lead in this area. Okay, thank you. Any apologies for absence, Rabia?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Josie, Levy and Rose.
Do we know of any other apologies? Councillor Premru? Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest, item 2. Do members have any interest to declare? No? Okay. 2A, terms of reference of the Corporate Committee. Has everybody had a chance to look at the terms of reference which has been sent? And can we note the terms of reference for the Corporate Committee for the year 2022-23? Great. Okay, I'd like to hand over now for item 4 to Stephen Davison, who will be demonstrating the noise works. Am I?
Sorry, point of order. Just on the minutes for the extraordinary meeting 25th of May, in item 3.
That's a very good point because I've completely bypassed them. So
yeah.
Was that your point?
I also had a point within it as well. I'm not listed as being present, but I was present on the 25th.
Okay, that's we can make sure you're included, Councillor Binney Lubbock. So
sorry,
item 3.
Can I just add to that?
I'm
listed as present and I wasn't present.
You're listed as present and you weren't present.
Yeah.
Okay, also noted. Item 3, can we agree the minutes of the meetings held on the 25th of May 2022 and the 8th of March 2022 for those that were present? Thank you. Now over to item 4 and presentation on noise work. The presentation is actually going to be on the big screen here, so we are going to come and sit behind too.
No, no. Probably on there. Depending on time, the equations automatic to get straight work. If not, quick one pretty good. Depending on time, the equations automatic to get straight work. If not, quick one pretty good. What it is. Most ones is great.
So it's the front end for what any resident would see when they go to report noise online. So a form very similar to when you would enter in your details at the beginning, then say what the problem is. Then at the very end, it will give you some advice on what we do next. The other part of the presentation is what the officer would actually see and then what information they would put into the system. So it will take a few minutes, I suspect, but we can either wait for ICT, yeah, or push it back to the end. It's entirely your choice, Chair.
I have a question while we wait. Is the NoiseWorks app available on app stores and things, or is it a online portal only?
So it is just an online form. So initially the council had Fix My Street, and we were using that to integrate noise into it, and we were working with My Society. During the development, it was decided actually we're better off to have a standalone system, which is called NoiseWorks, sometimes referred to as the NoiseWorks app, but it is just an online form. So it'll work off any Android, iPhone, computer, tablet. No need to download, just go to your web, pop in the details, and they will come up. Councillor Fiona Thomas.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you, Stephen. I'm conscious that we're streaming this live, and we on the screen we've got details of, I'm not too sure if that is just a makeup details or real details of individual and the address that is on the screen.
Yep, so this is just a test site.
Okay, that is fine then. I just want to be sure we're not sharing people someone's data live. Thanks.
No, it's good to know that those online can see it, but it is just a test site that we're using, so no personal details.
Congratulations for those waiting online. If we move on to item 5, can I invite Jerry McCarthy to introduce the Environmental Enforcement Annual Performance Report 2021 to 22.
Thank you, Chair. Before I introduce this report, just want to say there isn't a huge amount of reference to noise in this report because we already brought a report on noise to Corporate Committee in March. So in case members have any questions as to why there isn't a lot of information, that there was a previous report on noise in March to committee. So just some members are mindful of that. This report's refer to page 15 of your agenda. And this report sets out the annual noise performance for the annual performance report for the enforcement service for financial year 21-22, and it sets out the key areas relating to enforcement, management arrangements and resources. And at paragraph 1.5, just make it clear that enforcement hackney continues to incorporate an integrated approach so that they deal with a wide range of issues from highway obstructions, including A-boards, littering, fly tipping, etc., antisocial behaviour, so the most appropriate course of action can be taken. They also, in paragraph 1.6, a specific reference to antisocial behaviour, where we liaise with partners, including the police and housing associations, gives greater resilience and ability for specialists to collaborate and to prioritise the powers that are available to the Council in the Antisocial Behaviour Crime Policing Act 2014, including closure orders, community protection notices and community protection warning notices. If you have the background on page 16, paragraph 4.1, basically enforcement service was established in May 2017 as part of the Community Safety Enforcement Business Regulation Service and was amalgamated with previous services. The main enforcement service is split into 2 teams, North and South, each headed by an enforcement manager, and then each team has 6 ward-based principal enforcement officers. They're non-uniformed, 2 technical support investigations, and depending on how many officers are available, up to 12 uniformed enforcement officers, including 2 apprentices, 1 in each team. And just want a bit more specific information, because I know there's new members on the committee. The ward-based officers, they have 2 wards each in the main, and they deal with a variety of complex cases, including ingrained antisocial behaviour, some fly tipping cases, complex domestic noise investigations, and obviously most of this is delivered in close cooperation with Hackney Housing associations, our environmental protection team and business regulation, and obviously colleagues in children's and adult safeguarding, because a lot of safeguarding issues occur during these investigations. And obviously these officers are a single point of contact for their ward areas. They also work out of hours on a rota basis, one weekend in 6, and they deal with proactive or reactive issues, including street trade. Illegal street trade might be happening, licensing issues, and liaising with other agencies as well. For paragraph 4.5, the uniform service, and obviously you'll probably see the enforcement officers out and about patrolling the streets all times of the day and night, and obviously they don't have any formal limits other than those imposed by legislation and the resources of the service. One thing I would say about the uniform service and enforcement service in general, they cannot respond directly to activities considering crime that would be usually dealt with by the police. For example, stabbings, drug dealing, drug use, drug supply, or they will have a supportive role. And I just want to reiterate again that primacy for these issues does rest with the police and not the council, but the council has a supportive role in dealing with these issues. If there's a problem, for example, with, say, drug dealing or cuckooing, say, where a tenant has their property occupied by people for illegal activities, then what we can do in those circumstances is apply to the court foreclosure order to get that, so that no access is provided to that premises except for the tenant or maybe their immediate family or officers of the council. Or in certain cases, if it's so bad, we may actually ask the court to have the tenant taken out of the property for up to 3 months, which can be extended for another 3 months. But that is a rarity when that happens, but those powers are available to the council. So if paragraph 4.6, I just wanted to mention something about tasking. Uniformed officers are tasked on a weekly basis, and on top of page 17, you will see all the work that they actually undertake on a weekly basis. And there is an awful lot going on. That's coordinated at the weekly tasking meeting. The police attend that, colleagues on housing, parks, CCTV, other attend that on a regular basis. So they attend every week. So we actually know what we're doing, and everything that is actually done is on an intelligence basis. So if we're aware of sort of ongoing ASB on an estate, then that needs to be put through to our intelligence hub in advance of the meeting. That could get what's on the agenda for the partnership for the tasking meeting. So then that's actually it's decided that whether resources are allocated to that matter or not. And it really depends on, it's all done on a case by case basis and intelligence led, which just because somebody says they saw ASB in the state doesn't necessarily mean it will automatically get resources allocated to that. There has to be some intelligence based on that. I just want to mention as well, paragraph 4.7. In addition to this, there's a larger partnership tasking meeting on a monthly basis, and that's more problem solving. And obviously, any requests on the police are discussed, or housing, or CCTV enforcement, or whatever, and we go through a multi-agency problem solving approach to deal with those. And that is further on in paragraphs 4.7, 4.8, and 4.9. So,
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Are we allowed to ask questions during the report? Is that helpful? Okay. All right. Thank you.
And that's paragraph 4.10. Just want to state that enforcement officer interactions are usually one-off offences and are dealt with at the time, and then the more complex cases are dealt with by the principal enforcement officers. On to paragraph 4.12, service highlights. One of our priorities is A boards, and members will know there's been an A board policy in place since 2014, and we continue to enforce that. And obviously, everything in that we would deal with it on a graduated basis. But I do have to say, depending on the offence, if it's a serious offence, then a fixed penalty notice can be issued for the first time if something happens. But we normally deal with it on a graduated approach in relation to A board specifically. And there is a policy that it's on council's internet. So if you want more information, that if you're on the highway obstructions, you will find that information. Paragraph 4.13, which is some good news and progress. TfL are responsible for enforcement of red routes, but we have reached agreement with TfL that they are happy for Hackney enforcement officers to undertake enforcement of highway obstructions on red routes. I know committee have been discussing this for a number of years, and I wasn't overall in favour of it for the simple reason that I felt we should get resource from TfL to do this, but they said we can do it. We are doing it where we have issues raised with us, but we have not got any resources from additional from TfL to do this. And again, this impinges on the work of officers doing, because we're expected to do this with no additional resource. So that's something everyone needs to be mindful of. Paragraph 4.15 did want everyone aware that we do have a enforcement policy which was approved by Cabinet in January 2019. Most of our activities are undertaken in accordance with that, and it is normally a graduated approach. But as I have said before, particularly in relation to waste rather than highway obstruction, we can issue an FPN for a false defence. But with normal circumstances, we wouldn't necessarily do that. But depending on the situation, officers have that discretion, and it's only right that officers have that discretion because they need to deal with things when they find them, rather than having to report back on any delays being encountered on any issues. Paragraph 4.16, again on page 19, antisocial behaviour is one of the big issues officers deal with. And as I said, the principal enforcement officers deal with a lot of serious ingrained antisocial behaviour that happens. They work alongside the police, housing, parks and other services, the SNT officers and sergeants in the wards as well. And they have a variety of powers that they use under the Antisocial Behaviour Crime Policing Act. Also, paragraph 4.17 is principal officers also deal with the removal of illegal pirate radio stations in conjunction with Ofcom and Hackney Housing as well. We have done a lot of work on that. Obviously, they interfere with radio communications, aircraft systems, and they can be a nuisance. They're a nuisance as well to people in residential blocks. Onto the nighttime economy. This is one of the sort of major areas of enforcement for officers, and that's covered on pages 20 and 21. I'm not going to go into huge detail on this, but just wanted to say that officers patrol the nighttime economy during the nighttime economy hours, and they do the same powers they use during the day. And we also have a very detailed community safety nighttime economy partnership action plan, which focuses on designing our crime. One of the things I did want to mention was we have increased CCTV in Shoreditch. We've got 1.1 million inputs of additional funding to improve the CCTV in Shoreditch, which has been a huge improvement, and that has helped us and the police in undertaking enforcement. And obviously, we work in conjunction with the police on this very, very closely. We have a late night levy, which was introduced in 2017, and obviously that applies to businesses that are open between midnight 12:01 and 06 hours. And obviously 70% of that is used to contribute towards providing, and it's outlined in the report. And obviously we give money from the late night levy for policing, and the last financial year 190,000 of late night levy funding was granted to the police. I did also want to mention in Shoreditch there's a new town centre team there, and I know Councillor Virginia Thomas and the Mayor lobbied hard to get this team in place. So there are actually a team of officers which is available for Shoreditch specifically, and it has brought huge benefits, and obviously it has its own action plan. And on top of that, then there is a separate nighttime economy action plan, which I'm not going to go into. That's paragraph 4.25. The only other thing I did want to mention in the nighttime economy is our intelligence hub now produces a weekly update which is circulated with partners, and there is a weekly meeting which follows on from our weekly tasking meeting based on the NT feedback from the police, and combining it with sort of noise, commercial reports, ASB crime reports, and enforcement officers reports. So we're actually targeting issues that we know from an intelligence point of view that are occurring in the nighttime economy. Paragraph 4.27 is public space protection orders, which is a lot of area of work involves enforcement of these. A PSPO was previously approved in April 2019 to control unlicensed music events in Wick Woodland, and we're currently out of consultation on that for renewing that and widening to certain other areas, including Millfields Park, Dalbury Fields, and some TfL land by the A12, where there have been illegal unlicensed music events which have caused problems. and also the Hackney Marshes as well, which is another area that's been problematic. In March 2021, Cabinet approved the making of public space protection law in relation to dog control, and that's in paragraph 4.29. And there are links to how you report information about dog farming, etc. That's on page 4.30. And there are links to the public space places protection order and back on the website to that. And that has come about because a resident was finding it difficult to report dog farming, and one of our officers spent a lot of time with the web team getting that right, ensure that people are able to report things and get a response. We also, in relation to alcohol control in the public place, Cabinet approved borough-wide PSPO. We'd previously gone out to consultation on that in July, between May and July, and one of the things we want to do was ban alcohol consumption in London fields, but as a result of the consultation, which the respondents, 77% of respondents not being agreeable to that, we didn't go ahead. It was recommended to Cabinet that we didn't go ahead with the ban in London fields, and that didn't happen. On paragraph 4.35, and I know there's two members of London Fields here, it shows the work we've been done in London Fields in the past couple of years. We did have an injunction in place. That's no longer in place. Last year, over the summer, we had a team of 12 officers covering 12 days a week. And on page 24, you will see the sort of enforcement activity they undertook. And I have to say, London Fields, I think, will always be problematic because of warmer days. It gets very, very busy, and it can become exclusionary to families and local residents. But we know as well, and for people living in overcrowded accommodation and in flats, is a green lounge where people can go and get some respite during the week, at the weekend, go and enjoy and sit out in London Fields Park. Paragraph 4.39, I want to refer to the Dolson Project, which is work we're doing to reduce ASB and crime and disorder in the Dolson area, particularly Ridley Road and Gillette Square. And we have officers who are due to dedicate 4 days a week to that work. And they've also been dealing with commercial waste caused by the commercial premises bordering Ridley Road Market. And one of the things officers have built is an intelligence picture, which has been fed back to the police. And we have a fortnightly meeting with the police to share information on that and to actually deal with the issues that occur as a result of that. Paragraph 4.45, just want to raise, is engagement with the street population is an important part of that project, and to engage individuals to support services, and this has produced some positive outcomes. And one person we referred to has been successfully rehoused, and that's really due to the perseverance and hard work of the officers who've got all the necessary details and helped them. If I move on to paragraph 4.51, one of the issues that obviously will always be a problem would be the rate of growth. So we know business and households increasing, the number of households has increased. And we have to address that because obviously we're getting more and more service requests through, and we manage a lot of that through nighttime economy, weekend working, etc., etc. Other issues are covered from paragraph 4.53 onwards. And obviously one of the big issues, as you will realise, is public space ASB, and I've referred to that earlier on. But having said that, in paragraph 4.5, nuisance neighbours and domestic noise are still the greatest source of ASB reported to the service. And obviously staffing the out of our service requires 3.19 FTE full-time equivalent enforcement officers and 1 technical support officer. I have mentioned reference to noise box, so we'll come back to that again later, hopefully. The other highlight I just want to mention was paragraph 4.63 was in relation to fixed penalty notices. And you will see that the numbers have increased to the last year compared to previous years. I know in 2021 we had lockdown, but you will see the numbers have gone on page 31. There's a comparison the last 3 financial years, and you'll see the numbers have, even compared to 2019-20, the numbers have increased considerably from 1,706 to 2,760. And a lot of that is due to technology and due to officers working in a more coordinated way. That's just presumed got better outcomes for everyone. And top of page 32, there's a table just showing the general enforcement we've done against in comparison to the last 3 years. And again, one of the things I did mention earlier on is that council is actually good at getting closure orders under the Anti-Social Crime Behaviour Crime Policing Act 2014, and the issue of community protection notices. We served a lot of those as well, and as an explanation there. But a lot of the community protection notices are served due to antisocial behaviour. And one thing I haven't mentioned in the report is we have 4 antisocial behaviour action panels monthly, so there's 1 a week, and they deal with cases reported to the service, and they deal with the high risk cases, and they are actually assessed as high risk based on a matrix, and they're automatically referred to the panel, which meet weekly, which ensures there's no delay in dealing with high risk ASP, which obviously is a concern to everyone. And I think, Chair, on that I will finish. There's just some statistics as well on the top of page 34, which members may find relevant.
Thank you very much, Jerry, for running through in detail on your report. Now, there's a lot of detail there, members, particularly for our newer members. So I'd like to invite you to ask any questions that you may have on this report. We aren't making any recommendations, so the report itself is just for noting. So we'll do that once your questions are completed. Councillor Desmond.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, Jerry, congratulations on your exemplary work over the years. I'm always inclined to sing When Irish Eyes Are Smiling, but you've always been very helpful whenever I've had a sensitive case, and Dawn Henry in my ward has also been good. But there are challenges and difficulties which do concern me. The first thing is I can't see anything here about graffiti. And when I was going around Shoreditch and Kingsland Road, the area has deteriorated considerably. Almost all of the shop fronts, when they have the shutters down, are covered in graffiti. And Home Office research has shown that where you have this level of graffiti, it encourages antisocial behaviour. I do think we need to find a mechanism to deal with it. Look, if Banksy wants to put up something nice somewhere, I'm all in favour. He can do it in my house in Clapton if he likes, but a lot of this graffiti is aggressive. Some of it is unpleasant. A lot of it is tags which are meaningless. So I want to see something done with that. The second thing is there have been an increase, partly because of lockdown and various other factors, of problems associated with mental health. And there's undoubtedly more people approaching me in the area I represent who are having to deal with people within their buildings who are causing trouble. And sometimes this is not something that they can control. So I want to ensure that you're liaising carefully with adult social services, because these are sensitive issues and we have to look at the well-being of all parties. I understand that where council housing is involved, it's the housing department that deal with many of these issues. I don't know, do you liaise with them on them, or do we purely leave it to housing? Because certainly there's one case where it's an issue where there's no major problem with tenants, but they put wooden flooring down and the person is working nights underneath, and he can't cope with the noise that's coming from above, and this has been persistent. So I think a holistic approach is needed in all these cases. In many instances, compromises can be reached, but where people do have severe mental health problems, we do need to work closely with adult social services.
Come back, Jerry.
I'm back to the second point first. Yes, we work very closely with the Hackney Housing ASP team. So they attend the weekly tasking meeting, they attend the partnership meeting, they also attend the antisocial behaviour action panel. So we work very, very closely with them. Steve Davison, who's behind me, he liaises with they're split, they work the same way as we do, north and south. So they're split into 2 teams as well, and both teams work very closely with each other. And we also work very closely with the adult safeguarding team as well. in relation to people with mental health. But as you say, dealing with mental health is very challenging and it can be a very long and complex process. And I'll defer to Steve about the graffiti question, if that's.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Councillor Desmond, yes, graffiti is one of the issues that our team can deal with, as well as the police. One of the perennial problems we have is having officers in the right place at the right time. Traditionally, it's in the early hours of the morning, in secluded areas where uniformed officers aren't. So we do use our colleagues in CCTV and the Safe Neighbourhood team to try and pinpoint where best our resources should be to tackle the problem. The other side of it is ensuring that it's removed quickly. And environmental operations are very good at responding within 24 hours to remove graffiti. And then our team also have powers under the community protection notice warnings to engage with landowners to ensure that it's removed swiftly. And if they don't take the action, we can follow up with some other steps. But it is one of those difficult ones. If an enforcement officer's there and speaks to someone and they run off, the enforcement officer has no powers to follow that any further other than to share the information and the intelligence we have to better try and pinpoint evidence to help the police should they follow a criminal damage route.
Have you had your questions answered, Councillor Desmond?
Hi, hello, thank you.
Thomas.
Hi, just on actually following up a little bit on the graffiti, which I really welcome what our colleague has just said. But I will also add that I think I would like to see that Hackney Council does offer a permanent space for graffiti artists because we are in a very diverse borough. Graffiti doesn't always mean that has to be violent and aggressive. It's an expression of culture, of art and creativity, and we're in a highly creative borough. So I would really love to see that happening. I have seen, actually in front of my house, I live very close to Kingsland Road, what I've seen what you just described, and I can see the frustration. But I also have always wondered, are we actually spending a lot of cost on trying to avoid something that is unavoidable? And maybe let's look at, just as a recommendation, that hopefully you have a permanent space for expression of artistic thoughts and ideas of the borough. I have just a question about data, if that's okay. It's really well explained, your report. I do think it's just so enriching to know what is covered, especially me as a new councillor. So I do feel very reassured that it's really well looked into. What I would like to see and know, especially being a mental health practitioner for young people, and the impact it has, antisocial behavior, protocols on young people. I'd like to know what is the data behind antisocial behavior. How many young people does that mean? This especially because I do know that young people have been caught into antisocial behavior, say for example outside school when they've been, I don't know, perhaps doing something that then it was regarded as antisocial behavior. But I do see a lot of, for example, I live very close to Shoreditch, and I see a lot of, you know, as is described here, a lot of drunk, kind of like disrupting, but I don't see them getting any antisocial behavior sort of measures. I don't know what the comparison is. I'd like to see the data or find out a bit more. Thank you so much.
Thank you. In relation to the permanent space, I'll take that up with the culture team and see if they're able to look into that. I can say we don't serve any person under 18 with a fixed penalty notice. So any action we take up people 18 years or older. And obviously if there's an issue with a young person, they with a mental health, the action will be taken against the parent or guardian of that young person. So, and I would say from my knowledge, the number of young people we deal with is low in relation to that type of activity.
Are you happy with those answers, Councillor Turbo-Deloff? Great. So I'd like to go to Councillor Fajana Thomas, the Cabinet Lead, who's online first, just in case she wants to comment on something broader.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to come in regards to Councillor Desmond's question, is just to reassure him that in addition to what Jerry have said around ASB on our housing estate, that I do have quarterly meeting with Councillor Mackenzie as the lead member for housing, as well as the director of housing and officers, or ASB manager, ASB or head of service, or quarterly, to look at all those things, and the issues are discussed at strategic level and taken forward, just to reassure you about that, Councillor Desmond. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor John Thomas. Is that okay, Councillor Desmond? That was helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Fajana Thomas.
So I've got Councillor Young, then I've got Councillor Binney Lubbock and Councillor Sadek as well.
Hello, I've got 3 questions on 3 different bits of the report. I hope that's all right. First one is about the use of officers to, I'm going to use the word police, but I know it's our officers, for particular events. So, for example, where there is a festival in Finsbury Park or a festival in Victoria Park, which are not in Hackney, as I understand it, we do provide support in sort of enforcement for those festivals. I was just wondering how that's funded, where that does happen, and to what extent that support extends to coming back into the borough. So where people are leaving wireless, coming into Hackney to carry on celebrating, how are we dealing with that, and what sorts of resources are put in? Similarly, at the other end of the borough, people are leaving, what's it called, All Points East, and coming into Hackney to celebrate. Where's the funding coming from for our officers to support that? That's question 1. Question 2 is about how you work with different sort of across teams. So in my casework, I quite often see cases which are noise combined with planning. So there'll be a planning issue or a request for planning enforcement combined with a noise problem by neighbours, for example. There are lots of these, so I'm not identifying anyone. In those sorts of cases, can you tell me a little bit about how you work across the teams with the noise team and the planning team to work together? So, for example, planning might take quite a long time to do something about, but noise potentially might take less time. And the last bit was just on the data here. I noticed that, and I don't know what all of these sections mean. You've got enforcement under various different sections, and one of them is section 87, which when I looked it up is called littering, but you've got section 87 urination. It actually appears twice, by the way, in the grid. So you've got 4 in 4 cases or 4 enforcement actions in 2019 to 20, and then plus 29, so presumably 33, whatever that is. Where there must be more than 33 cases of urination in, where there's been an officer nearby. So how are we making decisions about enforcement? Is it that we post an officer somewhere where there's been a real ongoing problem and concerns expressed by businesses or residents, and they wait to see what happens? Or is it repeat offenders? Or how are we allocating our scarce resources in those sorts of cases?
Right, I can answer your last question very easily. The 4 that you see in relation to 2019, they were FPNs that were issued on paper as opposed to mobile technology. So that answers that. And obviously, we have a heat map of areas where we know people where the most FPNs have been served, and that's where resources are allocated. That's discussed again every week of weekly tasking and resources allocated to the priority areas. In relation to your first question about wireless, we will have additional officers out for wireless on the 2 weekends coming up. But I have to say, we don't get any additional funding for that. But what Festival Republic do, they undertake patrols every weekend at night on a Friday and Saturday. and they feed that back to us, which is then fed into the intelligence hub, which again feeds back into weekly tasking. So we do get, while we don't get funding, wireless are doing patrols in Brownswood Ward 2 nights between 8 and 2 every Friday and Saturday night. So that's an agreement we reached with them, which has been very successful, and it has continued through COVID. So, and we get those reports, and the information go back to the intelligence hub and acted on. And I've forgotten your middle question. Oh yes. So yes, officers work very closely together, and there is a case I know about this week where planning enforcement and environmental protection are actually going out together. So, and I hear everything you say, that planning takes enforcement takes an awful lot longer. There was a particular case where during COVID, it took a long time for a case to go to court. And as you know, somebody can appeal against the planning enforcement notice. Then that appeal has got to be heard. And then on top of that, then there's time for complying. And it just takes a very long time with planning. I accept that. And noise is probably a quicker route. But officers work closely together. And as I said already, there is a case this week where I know officers are doing a site visit on Thursday to try and resolve a management plan associated with a particular issue. And I know what case you have in mind specifically on the other one.
Thank you.
Vinnie Lovick.
Hi there. I've got a few quick clarification questions and then a couple of other questions related to different parts of the report. On the clarifications, 4.46, it mentions swim, and I'm just wondering if you could clarify what that means.
It's support where it's needed. I apologise that this wasn't corrected in the report. So that is a charity that helps black men in Hackney.
Okay.
So obviously, if there's street users, people on the street homeless, that's a charity that supports them in addition to everything else.
Fantastic. In 4.28, it mentions about a consultation around the PSPO around the marshes. I was just wanting to find out who that consultation is with, and it's not listed at the end where it lists consultations?
It's with the consultation team, so it should be on the consultation page of the website.
Okay, it's not listed on page 27 where it says consultations. Should it be in there as well in the report?
I think consultation, the governance officer may correct me. I think that's not necessarily consultations on the BSB, it's consultations on this report.
Okay, thank you. And the other 2 points were around, one was about the dogs situation. I'm just wondering if you're working with animal welfare organisations to ensure the welfare of the dogs that are removed, and how many is that, and if any are put down as part of that. So if there's any data around that, that would be quite useful to know. And then the other question is around Dolston. And you say that there's been some positive outcomes, but I'm just wondering if there's any particular data around the Dolston project, and also with the late night levy, how many Dolston venues are paying the late night levy. Not a lot is said about what's been sort of put in place other than sort of policing there. I'm wondering how much the community is involved in creating that plan for how that late night levy is used, because it only mentions spending, I guess, around Shoreditch, and I'm just wondering if some of that is being distributed in and patrols and things are happening in Dalston as well.
Thank you. Yes, the late night levy, there is a late night levy board which oversees the late night levy, and the spending is agreed that there's recommended to the board what money will be spent on. The board agrees that ultimately I have to sign off on all the spending for the late night levy. So it's public money. I've got to be assured that that is spent properly and is accounted for. So every penny of the late night levy that we receive is accounted for. One of the things we have done is we have an accreditation scheme in place for late night venues. So if they comply with training, certain things, and they have policies on violence against women and girls, which is a particular issue in the nighttime economy, then they will get a 30% reduction in their late night levy. And we will have our first certificates awards, the first 25 venues on the 19th of July. So, and money, I can't give you the precise number of venues in Dolson, but I could find that out for you. And I can also get some information on activities that the enforcement officers have done in Dolson, how many antisocial behaviour warnings and penalty notices have been issued since the project commenced. I can provide that to Rabia, and that can be circulated to members. In relation to your query on dogs, we don't deal with stray dogs within my service. That's part of environmental services, and that would need to be directed to environmental services about stray dogs. We just deal
Sorry, it
with
wasn't.
enforcement.
Yeah, it wasn't to do with stray dogs, just the illegal dogs that was enforced, I think is mentioned.
The dangerous dogs are ultimately dealt with by the responsibility of the police. So they would, any illegal dogs, the 4 categories would be seized by the police and they would deal with them.
Question, Councillor Finney, love it.
Yes, thank you.
Your questions, great. Anybody else got any questions for this item? Oh, Councillor Sadek. Can I just come to Councillor Fajana Thomas, just in case she's wanting to talk about this item? Councillor Fajana Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chair. It's just to Councillor Luback, the question you asked about late night levy. Jerry's answered it, but I just want to add to that the late night levy is set up by legislation and the guidance from the Home Office, the legislation around the spending with late night levy. At least 70% of the net levy needs to go to the police, while the local authority retain 30% of it. That is how the late night levy was set up. So it's not a levy that the council can just decide, oh, this is what we want to do, or call the community together to say, can you come and decide on this? As Jerry said, the levy spending are decided at board level. There's a late night levy board, and licensed premises that are paying late night levy are represented on that board. They are the ones that support or even make many of the suggestions of what we are using the late night levy for, if that makes sense. So it's not a sort of levy for community to come together to come and spend. But I can assure you that ACNI's late night levy, as Jerry mentioned, we've got our late night levy scheme. It's an exemplar in London, and we are called in various forum to come and talk about how the Hackney accreditation scheme is working, because it is something that I think is just us and Westminster and stand to be corrected. I have such initiative in the whole of London or areas with nighttime economy. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fajana Thomas. Okay, Councillor Sadek.
It's something, Jerry, that you've already touched on, but it was a question I was going to bring to the meeting, so I might just ask you to expand on it a little bit. It's about the fixed penalty notices and the rate at which they've gone up, even relative to pre-pandemic levels. And I just noticed, looking through those figures, that the increases are concentrated or the significant increases are concentrated in a fairly small set of offences. So section 148 of the Highways Act has gone up by about 500%, depositing anything on the highway to the interruption of user. I think the section 87 of the Environmental Protection Act has gone up significantly, and so have the willful obstruction of the highway. And this is something that's come up in my ward recently in the context of enforcement in a certain area for offences that I believe fall under these categories. You mentioned that it's to do with improvements in methods and use of technology. That's maybe explains some of the increases, but they just seem like fairly significant increases. So I just wanted to seek reassurance that you are sort of fully comfortable that all of these offences, and I know that there are processes that have gone through to sort of check them, just that there's no sort of overzealous or disproportionate enforcement going on, because these fines aren't insubstantial. and the residents are suffering from, lots of residents struggling with the cost of living. So it would just be regrettable if some of those, robust enforcement is one thing, but we don't want to overdo it. So just to seek your sort of what you'd say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. I'm satisfied that we don't there's no overzealous enforcement undertaken. Anyone who's issued with a fixed penalty notice can make a representation. That representation then is looked at by a manager who has had nothing to do with your original fixed penalty notice that was issued. So there is independence in that. And ultimately, if the person who isn't happy with that, they can attend court if they don't pay the offence. Because a lot of our offences are highway obstructions, I don't deny that. And the problem with that as well is we get lots of complaints, people with wheelchairs and mothers with pushchairs. We get a lot of complaints that the highway's been obstructed by builders' waste, rubble, all sorts of stuff, which I can understand. And in relation to Section 87, that's either urination or littering offences, which should in the main happen. And a lot of the urination offences, for example, happen in the nighttime economy in Shoreditch. So, and what happens with those is people in the morning wake up, find a fixed penalty notice in their jacket or short pockets and put the coal out, they realise what it is, and most of those get paid. Because people didn't realise what they've actually done.
Noted.
So for those members online and for the viewing public, we are just going to attempt a presentation again of the Noisework apps, and apologies for any of our ICT errors previously in this meeting.
Good evening, everyone, and sorry for the delay. My name's Steve Davison. I'm the Enforcement Manager for London Borough of Hackney, and I've been asked to demonstrate Noiseworks, which is our interim tool for residents and businesses to report noise within the London Borough of Hackney. So previous to the cyber attack, we used to have e-forms on the website where residents could go, fill in the information. It would automatically populate our case management system, which was Civica at the time. Since the cyber attack happened, that case management system is no longer available. So we had to work very quickly with My Society, who you may know for Fix My Street, to develop an interim system whilst we purchase a new case management system, which is still underway. So what I will do is I will go very quickly through the resident-facing form, because anyone can go onto the Hackney Council website, put in noise, and it will show you the form, and you can go through all the bits at your leisure. The other part, if I put my details in, it will probably log me out of the second part of the form, which is a test system. So we won't see any live information on there for people who have joined us remotely. So as you can see, if you go to hackney.gov.uk, put in noise, you will see all of the information on that page. It talks to you about how you can report noise. There are two ways. One is to click Report Noise Now. That will take you to Noiseworks, the form that you can complete 24 hours a day. It will go through. You'll see underneath there's a telephone number. That just takes you through to the customer contact centre. So normal council opening hours, you'll speak to one of the customer service operators. If you're unable to fill in the form yourself online, they will do it for you. So they will just take all of the details, they'll put it in. Out of hours, it goes through to the council's third-party provider, who do exactly the same. They would always encourage residents to fill in the form themselves, That way they can put in as much or as little information as they want. Alternatively, it is somebody just taking information, popping it in, it goes through. Once the form has been submitted, it goes automatically onto Noiseworks, which is an interface that council officers can access. So reporting noise at night, you'll see the hours of operation for the out of hours noise service. What that means is there are 2 noise cars on the borough between those hours that will look at the reports as they come in, contact residents with 1 hour to discuss whether or not at the time a visit is required to assess for statutory noise nuisance, or in some cases provide advice around what will happen next. So they'll be contacted during the week to discuss it, because at the moment we're unable to visit due to high demand, or actually it may be something that we're unlikely to witness a statutory nuisance. So it may just be sound within a property, somebody walking about. That wouldn't necessarily meet the threshold then and there at 1 o'clock in the morning. So if I click report noise now, you will see the same information pretty much that we've just had, and it talks you through what we're going to do. The noise guidance hyperlink just takes you to another page that goes into a bit more detail, what noises the council can deal with, what ones they can't. New issue is, if it's a new issue, the one if you've reported it before, that is to create an occurrence. So it may be that there is a one-time party happening down the road and you say, I just want to report it now. If that's, let's say, Thursday, Friday, you submit a recurrence. And ultimately, we're building a timeline of the disturbance that is causing you at that particular time. When we take further action, we will pull all of the data from all of the residents who have complained. Let's say it is a commercial premise or even an unlicensed music event, and we will build all of that into our case file to say resident A has contacted the council over a 4-day period so many times that this is happening, and everyone else. So it builds that long timeline, if you like, of everything we've got. I'll go to new issue, and as I said, I'll move through this one quite quickly. Hoping that it will just and as you can see, all of these questions are fairly straightforward, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them afterwards. We will go for music from a pub. So we can pick a different one. Follow the information as it says there in front of you. 8 a.m. So for these boxes, we would like as much information as possible, but we also understand that sometimes residents won't be able to supply this. So once it's been submitted, as I said, an officer will contact them. We'll go through all the information and we will ask a few more questions on some and not so much on the others to identify exactly how serious it is. And it may be that we move officers from another noise call to it straight away to deal with it. But I'll just get going because I know time is tight. At the end, we give them the opportunity to review all the information they've provided and then tick this box that just helps us later on when we're starting to build our evidence pack, if you like, that we've got genuine reports and we're not going down the malicious route. So that email address would now receive an email to say that you've submitted it. So the next time you go on, you'll put in your details and it will verify that you are the person that has made that report. If it's a customer service agent, this bit doesn't go through. So they wouldn't get it to their email address, it would go directly to the resident. But as that's a made up email address I've put in, if it's okay, we'll just take it as it's all gone through, it's now on the system. So can you see the confirmation page? Yeah. The people at home should be able to see it as well. If I move to another tab, and maybe one of the councillors can advise if they then can't see. Can you see the page with cases, tabs on the left-hand side? Oh, no, you're still on that one. Right. No, hang on. The one with. Yeah, I think it'd be quite helpful if you could see it as well. So I'll stop presenting quickly and I'll try and present a tab. See new? Yep. Oops, sorry. Yep. So this is the officers page. So whether it be 9 o'clock on a Monday morning or midnight on a Saturday night, the officers all have Chromebooks, so they can access this wherever they are on the borough. So they can be stood in the middle of Hackney Marshes and they will go to my cases, then we'll look at all the cases that are currently outstanding. And it's very simple in as much as all the cases will show. On the left, the officers can filter to see whether it's been assigned to an officer or it hasn't. We can look to see what kind of noise it is. We can also look to see what ward it's on. So if it's a case officer, one of the community safety principal enforcement officers that covers 2 wards, they will look at their wards, they'll see what cases have been assigned to them over the weekend. Let's say if it's Monday morning, they'll work through and go through all the actions. If I just click that very first one, you will see all of the information that's been submitted. I'll come back to the abatement notice served in a moment, but when the resident submitted that report, they weren't able to provide an exact address. So they've given a radius of where it may be coming from. That's probably more relevant, if you like, for one of our large open spaces. So if it's Hackney Marshes and you're on the Millfield side, you'd select an area closest to that. Otherwise, we could be over on the East Marsh by Waltham Forest. The same with Hackney Downs. That's why it's there. As we go through, when we know it's, let's say, number 1, the road, either the complainant would submit those details, we would verify them to make sure that the noise is coming from that property and it isn't from a different property, or on our investigation, we would then submit those details in there. All of what I'm showing you now isn't visible to the public. It's only council officers that can see this. So earlier on, I had to sign in with my council details and it only verifies I can access it because of that. So at no point would residents normally outside of this meeting see this side. Then as we move down, we've got a timeline. The timeline is very simply, as people add occurrences, it will populate that field with the information. And as officers take action, we would go through, select exactly what it is. So it might be an advisory letter because it's the first time we've received a complaint. It might be an abatement notice because at the time of the visit, that is required to abate the nuisance. It could be any number of these actions. We then apply internal notes. As I said, this is an interim system. It isn't a case management system in its fullest. So at the moment, we can't attach attachments. So we would just include the Google Drive link. So any other officer within the council that's entitled to see it would be able to open up the abatement notice and go, oh yes, it's been served for this against this person, and on their tablet or their Chromebook out on the scene, they can see it's in date, there's a breach, I need to then progress with a statement. The statement we would add in afterwards. There's lots of development that we're still doing with My Society to make sure that NoiseWorks grows into a fuller case management system. One of the things we don't have at the moment are cautionary contacts. So if a property has a cautionary contact applied to it, so it may be for a aggressive dog in the property, or they could have displayed violence to council staff previously, that isn't currently on the system. And as you can appreciate, if you get out of the car at 2 o'clock in the morning, you need to know a little bit more than Mrs. Miggins has just reported banging coming from next door. The other thing we need to do is automatic allocation to make sure that cases are going to named officers or teams within the system at the earliest opportunity. It still requires lots of manual intervention from our back office staff. The other things we need to do, I'll just work a little bit more on the actual layout and feel of the officer page. If you're looking at 70 complaints a night for noise, you need to be able to see, based on the questions they've answered, where that sits on a risk matrix. These are the ones that are being reported the most. So again, I manage the south of the borough, so I tend to pick on places like the Marshes and Mabley, but the Marshes have got 40 reports coming saying there's an unlicensed music event there. Even though they're down the list, we need to know that at the very beginning so we can start to activate our response. There's an agreed timeline of what's going on with My Society. We're hoping to have all of that finalised by September, at which point we'll be able to identify a closer estimated time of arrival for our new system, which is Arcus Salesforce. And this will feed into that, very similar to how Fix My Street feeds into the other systems that Waste Services, Highways, etc. have adopted since the cyber attack. A whistle-stop tour, Chair, and I think what I'll do is I'll speak to my colleagues in IT to try and produce a video of exactly what it does, that we can then share to all of the councillors. Happy to answer any questions, although I appreciate it has been a very rapid presentation.
Councillor Young.
Just wanted to ask about people who don't really deal with online systems. So if I'm, I'm maybe an elderly resident and I've got an ongoing noise and I've been told we'll keep a note of that, which I'm then either tearing out and sending in an envelope, or I'm photocopying it at the local photocopy shop. How is that then linked up with this? Are officers then having to kind of type in all the information from that to match up with this, or how are you dealing with it?
At the moment, yes. So the idea of the system was to reduce manual intervention as much as possible. But as you've explained, there are some residents that can't access the computer, or speaking to a customer service agent to try and explain all of that is very difficult as well. We have 12 community safety principal enforcement officers that will work with residents, and that may be coming into the office and we'll sit down and we'll go through exactly what they're experiencing. That could be on a diary sheet that we provide paper. It could be just in the back of a book, something that was to hand. We will then fill all of that out. So that's a bit more around us taking the time to sit down and really listen to what's going on, how it's presenting itself. As I've said previously, we'll ask the questions we need to really get to the bottom of where the noise is coming from. Is it likely to be statutory nuisance? Do we need to involve any other partners? Jerry highlighted earlier the ASBAP panels, so the antisocial behaviour action panels. It isn't just antisocial behaviour. We include noise in that, lots of others. The police are partners, mental health, safeguarding, and we will discuss noise cases there as well. If an abatement notice isn't the right route to go down, it may be actually that the person needs more support from other agencies, and that's the place we typically do it. But at the moment, if you come in with a bit of paper, an officer will sit down with you and put it all onto the system and manage the case with you.
Any other questions? So Councillor Tebber-Doloff and Councillor Binny Lowick, Councillor Deck, Councillor Ozen, keep them very brief because I'm aware of time. like to get your questions answered. But, yeah.
I also see just Councillor Samata also raising her hand. Councillor Ifra Samata has also raised her hand. So my question should probably touch on something similar as well. It's related to language. What happens with residents that do not speak English and want or wish or are not able to sort of use the system or express themselves? The other thing that I have found quite working in Hackney, very briefly, is that there are people that are either in a domestic violence relationship. There's a lot of arguments, a lot of, there's significant noise, but no one is reporting it. Sometimes these victims are hoping that someone reports it. So how do people know about this system so then they can use it as a tool to report sort of what's happening there? Thank you.
So the first part of the question, I would have to go back to the very beginning, but the council website and the council process is accessible friendly. So I'm not entirely too sure what languages you can select on the front page that it will then translate into. I can certainly look into it, but it's certainly in line with the council standard. The second question, how do residents know to report noise to the council? There are lots of engagement kind of strategies in place with residents, not only in Hackney homes, but also in other social landlords. We do have it as a prominent feature on the website. If you contact the police to report noise, they will tell you to contact the local authority. Can we do more work around publicising that we have a noise service? Absolutely we can. I think there is always going to be potentially a bit of a hiccup if you don't automatically think of the council to report noise to. We need to come up with a strategy on how best to do that. But I know from a resident point of view, there are lots of signs pointing towards our team, and on the website, if you go to the front desk at the service centre and say, I wish to report noise, they will take the report then and there for you. And if you go into stairwells within Housing Association and Hackney Housing, there are lots of signs on how to report ASB, noise and other types of issues as well. But I do take the point, there is always room to grow.
If I go to Councillor Billy Lubbock and then we'll go to Councillor Samatar.
I was just wondering if, like Fix My Strict, you could log some audio with the timestamp, if that's a feature that might be built into it in the future. And when they log back in, if they've made a complaint, is there anything around managing their expectations about how the kind of response times? And also, if this works as a system and is useful for other councils, can we use it as a revenue generation, sell it into other councils possibly?
The last question, I'm not sure. That would be one that's probably better answered by our colleagues in IT who have managed the project and speak to My Society more closely. We want, as part of the backlog, to enable people to upload all types of files. So that could be diary sheets in PDF, it could be a video clip, it could be audio. I know our colleagues in Hackney Housing work with the Noise app, and we're looking to get that tied in as well. As I've said, it is an interim system at the moment, so there are some bits that are still being kind of discussed with the more technical side, if you like. But what I will do is make sure as we get developments, we pass them back to yourselves.
Councillor Samatar, if you'd like to, over to you. To unmute your mic.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Perfect. Good evening. And I just wanted to very quickly say thank you for the presentation. And the question that I had, as Councillor Talbot Doloff said, it's to do with languages and accessibility on that angle. I was just looking at the form and the website links as well. Particularly, I didn't see anything to do with, I didn't see any Somali or any other languages there. So we are working towards making sure like more languages are added onto the system to make accessing forms as important as this easy, and I hope the team take that into consideration. But I also wondered, in terms of sometimes filling in or knowing exactly where to go to on a form that you need to fill in or something that you need to complete can be quite anxious for people who are recovering from various mental health journeys as well. So is there any video kind of demonstrations? Like right now, this is brilliantly done in the meeting, but a person would have to be watching the whole meeting and find it somewhere in the middle to see how the presentation is done. But is there like a quick digital explanation option in the council website that people can access and watch, and whether it's animations or whatever, to understand how to do that and how to report a noise? And the other one finally is about fireworks, and how does that kind of, in terms of when it comes to the impact that it's having, not just on people but on animals as well as a lot of people. So how are we taking not just people reporting it, but making sure we're enforcing how long fireworks can be kind of going on in the borough? Thank you so much again.
Thanks, Councillor Samatar. I think I'll go to Jerry to answer the question on fireworks, which is separate to the presentation, really. But because, you know, you weren't able to ask a question before, I think it's relevant to take this now.
Thank you, Chair. The legislation on the use of fireworks, that's actually the police responsibility. Where the council would become involved in it being a statutory nuisance would be if somebody, a particular household, was letting off fireworks on a regular basis and for frequencies at various times, which would then constitute a statutory nuisance. But other than that, it is the police that enforces responsibility for the use of fireworks. And there are specific exemptions for Guy Fawkes Night, New Year's Eve, the Chinese New Year, where they're allowed to extend beyond 11 o'clock at night to let off fireworks. So you've got to take that into account as well.
Thank you very much. Just to the languages, I've just gone to the website myself. I will ask our colleagues in the website team in IT to provide a full response to that. And the second question has slipped my mind.
Second question, if I'm right, Councillor Samatar, was about support for people with mental health issues in filling in the forms. Was that correct?
Yes, and making it digitally accessible in terms of just understanding the process and making it simplified and not as overwhelming. It's not overwhelming, but yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely, we'll take that away and we'll work with our colleagues in IT.
Great. Thank you for that question, Councillor Samatar. I hope it's you've had them answered by officers here.
Very well, thank you so much.
On and off the mic. Councillor Ozun and then Councillor Sadek. How many noise complaints, Jerry?
Residential noise is probably, I would say, between 4,000 and 5,000 a year requests we get. Just a whole variety of stuff. The main complaint is domestic noise, and lots of it's due, Councillor Desmond alluded earlier on, people have incompatible lifestyles which cause problems, and also people, you might say, for example, have an elderly person living on the ground floor and a family living above them, so they've got an incompatible lifestyle. So the elderly person will complain about noise from the people above, but people above maybe what we undertake and refer as normal domestic activity. So, for example, someone using a washing machine, say at 5 p.m, wouldn't be considered antisocial, but the person downstairs may hear it. But if the same person was using a washing machine at 3 a.m, that would be considered to be unreasonable. We work with various TRAs, social landlords, Hackney, the ASB team in Hackney Housing. So we're all, and as Steve has alluded to, cases related to noise can go to the ASBAPs as well. So it's not just non-noise ASB, noise ASB cases go to the ASBAPs as well. So this people aren't just left in an island, that cases are actually investigated by officers. And I think one of the questions Councillor Ludwig asked at the beginning was about response times and how we deal with them. If you report noise for the first time, you will just get an automated response, which is that email acknowledgement. But if you report it for the second time, the case will actually be allocated to community safety enforcement officer, who will then investigate. And a detailed investigation will be opened on that case. Because the first time you complain, maybe one-off noise, which you may not get round to, but the second time onwards you're reporting something, it actually says to us that there is a problem here, not just a one-off case that resolves itself overnight.
I think then we've got Councillor Sadek. Okay, great. Thank you for your presentation, Steve, and obviously want to leave the meeting now. You are very welcome to stay there as well, of course. Thank you. I think it's worth us seeing how, you know, the interface for residents, and also it informs how we guide and advise our residents. So thank you for that. Councillor Vinnie Lubbock, is this in relation to the presentation? Okay. Yeah. Can we come back to the minutes at the end of the meeting? Because I think there's a couple of actions that I kind of overlooked. So let's back to that then. What we need now for time is, you know, to move on to the next item. And I think I'm going to allow 15 minutes max for this item. So if you'll take that into account, Jerry, when you're presenting this report. Yeah. So item 6. Can I invite Jerry McCarthy to introduce the Enforcement and Environmental Protection Service Delivery Plans 2022 to 23? I'll assume that others have read the plan. So Jerry, you can keep your summary very, very brief.
Oh, absolutely. I know. I'll get my steps up for the day.
Apologies for the ICT issues, everybody, tonight. I hope we'll try and get this addressed for our next meeting.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quite brief on this report because we've discussed some of it already in this meeting, and some of the issues are referred to on the last report as well. So this report is on delivery enforcement and environmental protection service delivery plans for the current financial year. And I'll be very useful on page 37 for anyone who's following it on a paper agenda, and just start at paragraph 1.2, that it sets out the areas of service in relation to environmental enforcement, addressing antisocial behaviour, including nighttime economy, statutory nuisance, and the management resources allocated. Then paragraph 1.5 sets out the key areas related to environmental protection, which includes commercial noise, artificial light nuisance, construction noise, and the management arrangements for that. The background for this on page 38, paragraph 4.1, basically the plans have been prepared according with Council's guidelines and set out how Council is going to discharge its responsibilities into enforcement and environmental protection. And both of these services, very said, were established in May 2017. The following pages relate to enforcement, and I think we've covered those already, so I'm going to skip over those and move on to page 41, paragraph 4.9, which basically said that given the work undertaken by both teams is a close and proactive and intelligence-based process in relation to both teams. And one paragraph 4.10 is that both services provide the staffing for the out-of-hours noise service, which some of you may not be aware of, and obviously challenging as demand is unpredictable and just fluctuation at times of peak demand where we can get up to 20 service requests in an hour. And obviously the difference with dealing with requests can be quite quick in some to very slow in some. And obviously there is a triage process which Steve has alluded to in his presentation, which shows that there's 40 requests coming in about something happening now. It's just that will get priority over something else which has only been reported once. And the thing with that, page 42, if I point you to paragraph 4.14, and this is, I'm concentrating on environmental protection in this, shows that the activities of the officers is in relation to commercial license premises is directed through weekly tasking, which I referred to already, and inspections engagement are coordinated. And obviously from July 2021, when restrictions were removed fully from the hospitality premises and were allowed back to similar levels, it has caused an increase in service requests. This table at the bottom of page 42, which shows requests have gone up since, you will see in May 2021 with 256, and in March this year gone up to 430. So we are getting a lot more requests in from that as well. The other thing which I want to highlight was the risk assessment of paragraph 4.23 on page 43, and that shows the work which officers are doing. And again, I'm going to highlight environmental protection here. And one of the things environmental protection have done on paragraph 4.25, Dev, we've actually got a first response officer in place, and this really is a form of triage. So they basically filter and triage all new complaints received by the service, and we've got an additional officer in place since November 2021 to cover this. And this actually helps. That officer will deal with initial responses, deal with acknowledgements, carry out some site visits, and then refer anything that needs further investigation to ward officers. And you will see from paragraph 4.27, quarter page 44, a date of the service request received since the officer was requested, and they are offering, they're dealing with an average of 93 service requests every month. And obviously that's where it has given the idea, this has been really successful, and that it has given the opportunity for the dedicated ward officers to deal with licensing responses, responses to planning applications, consultation and temporary event notices, which they are running one of two consultees, the other one being the police. And obviously as well, they can deal with ongoing and complex cases in a better manner. And then I've just included some graphs comparisons from paragraph 4.29 onwards, page 45, 46. And at the top of page 47, you can see the number of temporary event notices responded to on time. And you'll see that went down during the pandemic, but again, it's now increased again. And obviously it increased slowly from April 2021. And as part of a service improvement in paragraph 4.32, environmental protection, they actually have a more stringent process, which includes checks and documentation, requirements of noise dispersal, COVID, smoking policies to be submitted, which allows the service to be in a better position to approve tenders that are concerned that return back to normal would increase this disruption to residents, particularly in nighttime economy areas. Also in 21-22, the environmental protection team supported the COVID response team, as they provided 3 officers to work with the team. And I think that's it in a nutshell, but I did want to concentrate more on environmental protection and enforcement, because you would have got a feel from that from the previous report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Jerry, have members got any questions for Jerry? Just to say that this report is for noting, but any questions, if you want to consider both the level and scope of the work that's being carried out, that is relevant.
Just two really quick questions. I was wondering what the, in paragraph 4.17, the equalities impact assessment, what kind of training or what kind of situations does that kind of come into play during the carrying out of this service? And also had a question about paragraph 4.33. It says the external funding for one of the officers ceased 31st of March. I was just wondering where that external funding came from and kind of what was the scenario around that.
Thank you. In relation to the equalities impact assessment, and again, that ensures that we deal with any issues any resident may have. They may have language barriers, they may have disabilities, they may have protected characteristics, that we take all that into account, ensure that officers don't actually discriminate against any resident on any grounds of that. And obviously, if somebody has mental health problems, which I haven't mentioned specifically in the report, then obviously we'll make sure that we would discuss that with adult safeguarding to see if we can help them in any way, because they may need additional support on top of what a normal person would need. So we've got to be careful with that. Paragraph 4.33, we did get funding from public health for the COVID response team, and that's where that funding came, with COM funding, and that ran out at the end of March 2022.
Noted.
Item 7, the Business Regulation Service Delivery Plan 22 to 23. Can I invite Jerry to produce the report? Again, assume, Jerry, that members have read your report, so summarise the key items you want to point out.
Thank you, Chair. This is on page 109 of your packs, and just want to highlight what business regulation consists of. Consists of food safety, occupational health and safety, environmental protection, which is commercial noise and other nuisances, trading standards and licensing. What this report on relates to all those, excluding licensing. I want to highlight paragraph 1.5, which is that the Food Law Enforcement Service Plan is a statutory plan, which sets out how we take out food enforcement in the borough. Paragraph 1.6, page 1110, it just shows that the report is prepared in accordance with the Food Standards Framework Agreement, which is template going back to April 2010. It's still an important part to ensure national food priorities are met, addressed and delivered locally, and it focuses on key deliverables. The performance of the plan is measured against fulfilment of the plan, and obviously it would say that the Food Standards Agency continues to monitor the performance of the service through annual enforcement data returns made to the FSA, and they have actually already asked for a copy of the food, the FLESP as I will refer to from now on. The FSA have asked for a copy of that, and they will ask for a copy of the minutes of this meeting to show that members will have agreed to that, and that is standard protocol for the FSA. In terms of health and safety, Corporate Committee, one of its remits is to look at health and safety other than as an employer. So Hackney is an enforcing authority in its own right and must make adequate provision for that purpose. And obviously, this plan fulfills the Council's obligation under Section 18 of the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act and the Enforcement Code. Trading standards, paragraph 1.13, again, it sets out what trading standards do. And just, you may wonder what trading standards do, but examples are set out in 1.15, which is safe storage of dangerous goods, preventing the sale of dangerous goods, counterfeit goods, the supply of age-restricted products such as alcohol, tobacco, and knives, and obviously dealing with fair trading, scams, and scams against the elderly in particular. So that is one area of work for them. In relation to food safety, you go to paragraph 4.3 on page 112. So for the current year, officers have worked out that we need to undertake 1,074 food hygiene, food standards interventions. And as part of that, we've got to deal with inspect 100% of category A, B premises. And category A and B premises are both premises which have the highest risk. So, for example, category A premises would be a manufacturing business, but it's not necessarily selling food directly to the public. So, manufacturing and then it's sold onto the third party. So, that would be category A premises. There are 6 categories, HF. Most of ours are category C and category D. And we have some E's and S, which are dealt with through an alternative enforcement activity. And examples of an E and F would be a newsagent which may sell some pre-packed food, or a chemist which would sell baby food. And the risk to those, they are technically food premises, but they are very, very low risk compared to, example, a takeaway that's operating or a restaurant that's operating, which would sell food prepared on the premises, cooked on the food, cooked on the premises, and might be kept at a right or wrong temperature, depending on what happens. So that was the example of that. Just refer you to paragraph 4.7, which is what directions the Food Standards Agency placed on all authorities in England and Wales. There's high priority, medium priority, and low priority. And as you can imagine, we're concentrating on the high priority. And during COVID, officers were able to do some remote inspections. So the problem was that is they weren't actually able to give a risk rating or score them. Now you may ask, why does a premises need to have a risk rating? If you are a small SME, sort of 1 or 2 person operation, you take away in packing, and you want to get onto delivery platform for Just Eat or Deliveroo, whatever, then you need to have a food hygiene rating of 3 or above to get on that platform. So for us, that's an issue that we try and help small business make sure that they're not discriminated against compared to a multi-international business or a chain which has lots of resources behind us to get all the necessary documentation in place so they can operate safely. It's important for a small SME to be able to compete a level playing field with those businesses, and we do officers do what they can to help them. Obviously, allergens is another issue which officers concentrate on as well. And again, likewise, if you're a small business, it is much more difficult to comply with the allergen legislation. Unlike, say, the example of Tesco or Costas, where they have central officers who would actually provide all that to the individual retail businesses. So there is a lot of work that officers undertake to help small businesses. I just wanted to clarify that. The other point of interest was 4.10, which shows the inspections officers did in 21-22. So there were only 147 visits allocated, and they took 1,229 visits. And you probably ask, why is that? But a lot of those were probably what are considered unrated premises, which is, say, a business that has registered with the Council as a food business, but may not necessarily be open. And also during COVID, a lot of businesses which were closed or forced to close due to lockdown, they varied their arrangements so they could open. For example, close shop, if they're registered as a food business, say selling milk, bread and other provisions, they could operate. Clothes could also be sold as well as the food. So that was that. And we have a lot of unrated premises, which you will see in paragraph 4.12 of the report. That's at the end of 21 to the 22, we had 814 unrated premises. We received 814 applications, which is a loss, which we never expected to get, and 433 of those have been inspected. Our priorities in the first quarter of this financial year is to inspect all the category A's and B's, get the unrated premises, which those 433 inspected, and to get that to a reasonable level, and also improve our broadly compliant premises percentage, which is premises which have a rating of 3 or above, to improve that rating. So the team have been doing a lot of work. There's a lot more to do, but obviously we said that the intention is to get all those businesses done by the end of June, and then we can take stock of where we are in relation to all our food businesses by the end of first quarter of this year. And then we'll review that. If we need more resources to actually meet the requirements of this plan, then we will put in a bid for the resources. But I'm not able to put in a bid for the resources unless I have the evidence to prove that with X amount of premises, we've only done Y amount of inspections, and I need evidence to justify any increase in resource and team. And I'm sure that's the same for most services in the council. Paragraph 4.16 on page 114 in relation to health and safety. Obviously, the officers can use a number of interventions to reduce risk. And also, when they are doing their food safety inspections, they also undertake a health and safety inspection of their premises to ensure that if any issues that come up with that, they then will serve either an improvement notice or a prohibition notice to ensure that the risk is ameliorated and doesn't happen. As I said, we are directed by the Health and Safety Executive on high-risk inspections that we have to do. That's set out in the Local Authority Circular 67/2, version 11, most up-to-date one. And obviously, again, I said, the work that officers in health and safety was displaced due to COVID. And you will see on page 116 some statistics on visits that were undertaken the last financial year and visits undertaken between 2020 to March 2022, so there is a lot of work ongoing. And then the other issue then is trading standards. And mentioned they deal with counterfeit goods, scams, underage sales, that type of activity. And you will see on paragraph 4.26 and 117, page 117, they also have high-risk inspections which they take, and they're categorized into high risk, upper, medium, and lower risk. And high risk is place that might, for example, be selling a knife. And trading standards do a lot of work with the police cadets on age-restricted products, which would be sale of alcohol, sale of knives, sale of fireworks. For example, in October, they also inspect all the premises that are licensed to sell fireworks, so they're complying. So, and they do, trade standards have a winter warmer event for elderly people, so that those elderly people are vulnerable at risk of scams. So a lot of their work is seasonal, depending on what's happening as well. And obviously, safety coming up to Christmas as well with the sale of dangerous goods. So there's a lot of work that they undertake in that. And there is more detail in all the various different plans on all of those services. And I think, Chair, I'm happy to leave it at that, but take any questions.
Thank you, Jerry. Before I come to members, I'm just going to pass over to Councillor Young, who's just going to address some of the challenges that your service has facing.
Hello, I'm just reading really the appendices to these and just sort of wanted to draw my own and others' attention to some of the notes that you've put in here. Pages 126, 127, 128. And just to note that the cyber attack had devastating consequences on EHS ability to deliver an effective service during the pandemic and afterwards, compounded by the loss of all policies, procedures, premises database and premises history, service being at a standstill as a result and still continues to have consequences. And you go on to say the service there are ongoing consequences of that, of the data breach. And also further down, it's predicted due to the cyber attack and pandemic, the service may not make a full recovery until 2023 to 4 due to the work required. Plus, on page 128, there's also the continued need to find savings from the service, which will also have a bearing on the effective delivery of this service and previous restructuring, so that the staffing resource is reduced by. I just really want to sort of draw all of our attention to enormous challenges we're facing.
To how difficult the work has been, but also to thank you for your perseverance in working through these challenges, which we know haven't been easy. So over to members if you have any questions for Jerry. Just to remind you, we are noting the health and safety and trading standard service delivery plans, but we are recommended to review and read the contents of the food law enforcement service plan. Okay. Any questions, members? 5 minutes for questions, if that's okay. Thank you, Councillor Osland. I'm presuming your mic wasn't working, but I'll just kind of repeat. So for businesses, sometimes some of whom have language, different languages, how do we work and how do we support in terms of dealing with some of these issues? Yeah, and in terms of the new legislation, correct? The kind of work we do. Can you provide an answer to that, Jerry?
There hasn't been any changes in legislation, so nothing has changed with regard to that. And as I did allude to in my report, we officers spend quite considerable time with small SMEs, giving them advice and guidance. And we also work with a business team as well. There's lots of information on the website as well from that. Also, if anyone has a problem with language, then we have officers who speak a variety of languages, which we can then send if the right officer can communicate better with the business if needs be. But it's not an issue we have found.
Thank you, Jerry. And just apologies to Councillor for John and Thomas. We're having some issue with some of the microphones here in the chamber. So I'm repeating where microphones are not working. So, have any more questions? Councillor Turbadiloff and Councillor Billy Lubbock.
Sorry. I'm not sure if it's related to Facebook, but it's looking at Asian several days of migrant family. Yeah, I have verified my question was, what are we doing with council? I mean, it's very. It was, is there anything that I know let's say that if you well, it has definitely for the nation, how we can
I can take Councillor Billy Lubbock's question as well, and Jerry could address.
The areas and promises that you mentioned a little bit about spying together. Just wondering if there are any additional role of mitigation measures. I guess high likelihood of current
No, there are no further additional measures proposed. The main thing we will look at is at the end of Q1, in particular in relation to food safety, how many overdue inspections there are still, how many unrated need to be inspected, and have we done all our category A's and B's? And obviously, we have got that agreement with the Food Standards Agency a derogation until the end of 2023. So I'm confident that if we do need additional resources, we will make that bid, but we need the evidence, as I said, to do that. And it all depends what, and I can't do that until the end of Q1. In terms of the other question, I'm sure that market, all traders there are licensed by the markets team, so there would have been some risk assessment undertaken by markets to ensure that they would have to comply with the terms and conditions of that. But what I can do is I can speak to the markets manager, check on that, and if not, then we can. If it's anyone trading on the market in terms of food safety, would have to have a food hygiene rating of 3 or above. They wouldn't be accepted otherwise. So I can check that with markets to make sure that that is the case. And I will also check with colleagues on trading standards to see if they have done any visits there on a Sunday, if they found anything.
Members got any more questions? Can we, Councillor Ozen, can we keep it brief? You got any comments on expiry dates on foods being exceeded, Jerry, and the role the council
They
has to play
shouldn't be
with?
offered for sale if the expiry of the use by date has been exceeded. That shouldn't be for sale. If there are specifics, then that needs to be reported directly to our technical business support team using that technical support email at hackney.gov.uk, and that will be passed on to the environmental health officer for investigation.
Questions? Can we first of all note the health and safety and trading standards service delivery plans? And can we agree the contents of the food law enforcement service plan for 2022 to 23? Agreed. Thank you, members. Item 8, just have a quick glance at the draft work programme. If anybody's got any questions on this. Councillor Desmond.
This, of course, is the standing committee that is the overriding committee of planning and subcommittee. We have to, as a committee, take very seriously the appalling situation that arose at Grenfell Town. I've been concerned for some time that the honourable involved in what I represent, highly include my opinion. Then I'd like to see it in September or whatever later. Officers talking about talent issues in Hackney, analysing the problems that we get some idea and investigate.
Thank you, Councillor Desmond. What we'll do is we'll take away that and see whether this fits in. We have the planning monitoring report where there can be some mention made, I guess, but it's not, yeah. But whether it's our remit or another committee, let me get back to you on that. Yeah. Anybody got any other comments on the work programme? Okay. Just going back to the minutes, which, as Councillor Benny pointed out, we did I quickly, I didn't address the actions. So let's just quickly have a look at the actions for the minutes. Yeah, so where are we? So obviously we had the demonstration. So Jerry, if you could just comment on action 1 to compile a list of the top 10 boroughs. I understand that we'll get that later on in the year when that's published.
Yes, what we've done, it didn't happen last year. No, we only do a return to the Home Office licensing return, which covers the number of licensed premises, number of pens, etc. So we have actually submitted that to the Home Office, who will send back a report for all of England and Wales in due course, probably by the end of August. And once I've got that, I can share that with members so they know, which then would show the top 10 boroughs in London. Temporary event notices, which was a question asked. And I think the question the councillor was asking was about 4.4 was about the issue with the TENS regime. And I'm not sure the exact answer to that, but as we all know, a 10 costs £21 to apply for. The administration of it costs significantly more than £21 because it can result in licensing having to consult with the police and environmental protection on every application. If a representation is made by either party, then a subcommittee meeting has to be held, which involves members attending. It intends governance putting an agenda together, sending out the papers. It involves legal representative being in attendance at the meeting, along with governance and officers of licensing. So £21, there is no return to the council on that. I don't think that fee will ever be increased because what TENS were originally designed for was somebody who's got a church hall or a community hall, which they wanted to have an event in. That is what temporary event notices were originally designed for. To give them a license for a one-off event for up to 499 people. But obviously the system can be used by existing venues to extend their hours of weekend, and feedback we've had from premises is that without this temporary event notice being available to extend their hours, their business would not be profitable. So I can't see that changing. I can't see the government wanting to changing it, but I do know Councillor Fitzgerald Thomas is intending to write to London councils to sort of explain our situation and why this needs to be reviewed.
Thank you, Jerry. That is very helpful. Councillor Benny Lomack. Thank you for picking that up. We haven't got the head of human resources here, so I think we will timetable and check when he's next due to be at this meeting, and then we'll make sure that action is planned. Or then it was promised, so if we get the information sooner, we can circulate that. I have had a meeting with the previous chair of licensing committee, and she reiterated the feedback that Jerry gave. I mean, TENS is quite a difficult issue to deal with, but I know there is lots of ongoing work and discussion with Jerry and Councillor Fitzgerald Thomas about how we as a council can lobby the government on this. So this issue isn't going away, and I'm sure we will be coming back to examine how it impacts us here in Hackney. The actions. Oh, Councillor John Thomas got a hand up. Apologies. Would you like to come in?
Chair, I think you've actually mentioned what I was going to say, just for the benefit of new councillors on corporate committee. This is on our public affairs agenda, and the plan is to see whether we can local MPs working with other boroughs, MPs with significant issue around TENS can raise a question in Parliament for a review of TENS in general. But like Jerry said, we don't know what the outcomes of that will be. So it is on the radar, and we are doing something about it in terms of the legislation around it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fajana Thomas. Okay, so moving on to item 9, any other business? I haven't been informed of any other business, so I'd like to thank you all for your attendance. To those of you who it's your first corporate committee meeting, I hope you've learned a lot and got something from it. And I'd like to close the meeting and I apologise. If you would mind me just asking Councillor Samatar to have the opportunity to speak to close our meeting.
Chair, I was clapping for you. Sorry, I was clapping because it doesn't have the hand. No point. Just thank you so much.